Hello there! This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the video you've all been waiting for. Yes, this is it. The best Brahms symphony cycles. And I mean cycles. I'm not talking about individual performances. I'm talking about cycles that show consistent excellence throughout all four symphonies, without exception. And that means some big names are not going to be included. Those will come up in considering each symphony individually, as I've already done, for example, with the Third Symphony, where we have two videos already, the best thirds and the worst thirds. And we may do the best, at least, maybe the worst of the other ones as well in due course. But I thought now was the time to do complete cycles. And I was really hesitating because there are just so many of them. And I was sitting around and I made a stack of them. And once I got to 30 or 40, I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? But it turned out to be easier than I thought, because the truly excellent ones are pretty much part of a consensus. We sort of know what they are, and we know what the acceptable range of interpretive options are in the Brahms symphonies, and we know how terrible they can sound and often do when people stray outside. I mean, it was really very easy. There are no great period instrument performances of Brahms symphonies, so that was easy. It really was. That eliminated a whole swath of modern ones. And in addition, one of the things I've said is that a lot of young conductors these days really have very little clue on how to deal with music in sonata form, at least as Brahms used it, how to create the long line, the dramatic syntax of the music, the give and take, how to actually shape and mold the architecture of the music. They don't get it. And the reason they don't get it, I think, is because they are much more interested in the kind of music that Bruckner nominally did in sonata form, which is stop, go, stop, go, stop, go in chunks, because so much contemporary music is written that way too. But Brahms is not. Brahms is totally different. And the other reason I think that a lot of modern conductors and a lot of earlier conductors found Brahms so difficult is that despite the fact that he had an incredibly strictly defined symphonic style. I mean, for example, I'll give you one aspect of it. Almost every movement in every Brahms symphony, without exception, almost, not everyone, but almost, like, how many are there? There's 4 times 4, 16, so maybe 14 out of 16. They will all end with every instrument playing the final chord. That was Brahms. Why does he do that? Because he believed that there should be no unnecessary special effects in symphonic music. It was different with the serenades. It was even different with the concertos and some of the other things he wrote. But in the symphonies, every instrument had to be necessary, and it had to be used to its fullest extent when it was used. If it wasn't used, it wasn't used. But when it was, it had to have plenty to do. Think about, for example, the tuba part in the slow movement of the Second Symphony, of all things, or the trombones in the finale of the Fourth, or the triangle in the same symphony's third movement. And all of those movements will end with a chord, loud or soft, in which all of the participating instruments have a part in that final chord, because he's telling us that this is the substance of the movement, the sonorous substance. Brahms was fabulous that way. I mean, he really had a point of view. But within that point of view, see my hands going like this? That means I'm getting excited. Within that point of view, the symphonies are so different from one another and so difficult to conduct and project. They're not easy. This is not music that plays itself. Sometimes the orchestration is clunky. Sometimes the actual musical argument is complex and needs to be clarified and articulated in a certain way. I mean, there are all kinds of tricks and issues that need to be overcome in order to project these symphonies as powerfully as they should be. And two of the very greatest conductors of the 20th century, Furtwängler and Toscanini, both got stumped by Brahms. Neither of them were able to put together a really perfect well-rounded conception of the Third Symphony, for example. That's the Achilles heel, actually, of most Brahms cycles, the third. And it's very, very, because it ends quietly, and it has, the finale is the most turbulent music that Brahms wrote. And to try and project that range of emotion within the context of Brahms' symphonic style is not easy. But neither Furtwängler nor Toscanini could do the third. And Furtwängler also had problems with the second. And Toscanini had, basically was pretty good with the other three. But usually, it depended on which version you're talking about. And I'm not into that crap, frankly. And that's what I think it is. I think it's crap. I think the idea that you have to go hunting around like some sort of musical mongoose on a treasure hunt looking for that great performance by that great idol conductor, I think it's just a stupid waste of time. I'm serious. I really do. I think it's just foolishness, because there are so many great performances of the Brahms symphonies out there by people who didn't have the problems that they had. So neither Furtwängler nor Toscanini are going to be in this discussion of great Brahms cycles. And that may surprise some of you, but I don't care, because I get to pick them. And these are really, really good ones. I am not kidding. So those are the parameters. That's how I feel about these symphonies going in. And the great Brahms cycles are the ones that are both respectful of Brahms's symphonic style on the one hand, and on the other hand are able to capture the full range of emotion and the extraordinary variegated quality of these different symphonies. I mean, the range between the First Symphony and the Fourth in terms of his musical development is really, really large. And his style changed really quite markedly from one to the next, even though he was pretty old when the First Symphony came out. So I really think that it takes an extraordinary amount of musicianship and sympathy to deliver all four symphonies equally well. But these are the performances that basically do it. And without further ado, I'm going to start with Two to Avoid. Two to Avoid, because this gives you sort of an example of what not to do, or what you need to do, or what's lacking in so many performances. The first, Haitink with the Concertgebouw. Now, Haitink is a wonderful conductor, and he did gorgeous recordings of the serenades, right? Because they're not symphonies. But, the Brahms symphonies are so serious and so symphonic, I think some conductors actually choke a little bit. All the things that made Haitink a wonderful conductor when he did things like Mahler and Bruckner count against him in Brahms. He lets the music speak for itself. And it doesn't. It just doesn't. It's just boring. So Haitink is one to avoid. Another one to avoid, a recent one, is Chailly, who did it twice. Once rather dully and traditionally with the Concertgebouw, and the other time rather sort of period instrument, swift, light, and lean with the Gewandhaus. And both are boring. They're boring because they are all made to sound the same. Because Chailly is letting the approach, just with period instruments sometimes, dictate what he does, rather than trying to explore each symphony as an individual and realize its individuality within the context of the overall performance approach. So those are two cycles that you can comfortably avoid, but all the rest of them, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 14 or 15 or 16 or 17 of them, are all must-haves. All of them. You should have all of them. You should have 25 Brahms cycles. You can't have enough, because the music is inexhaustibly rich. So let's now go through the others. The first, and this is a historical issue. If I'm going to go for historical, I'm not going to get Toscanini. I'm not going to get Furtwängler. I'm going to get Edward von Beinum with the Concertgebouw Orchestra. If you want the Concertgebouw, this is the set to get. This is the Scribendum reissue. They were also, remember the Dutch Masters series on Philips? They were all coupled. He actually did the First Symphony a couple of times, but these are spectacular performances. Why? You might say they're similar to Haitink's, in the sense that he lets the music speak for itself. But he doesn't. If you're paying attention, you see always so much character. The character is not extremes of tempo or crazy climaxes or Fort Wanglerian hysteria or Toscanini iron discipline and rigidity, all of which are sort of gross generalizations, by the way, so don't get back to me on those. But what you have here is miracles of phrasing, of balance, of give and take, collegiality between the conductor and his players. They love each other. They play like they love each other. He trusts them. He allows them to characterize their parts. And it's a magnificent Brahms cycle as a result. So that is where I usually start in the 1950s with Edward von Beinum. However, if you do want a sort of period instrument-y approach to Brahms, the guy to get is Macaris on Telarc with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. Now, Macaris did a particular thing with these symphonies. There is a typescript of Brahms symphonies which supposedly captures the Meiningen tradition of Brahms playing, which is where some of his symphonies were originally premiered with the Meiningen Court Orchestra under Hans von Bülow and Richard Strauss and all these great conductors. And that approach was a very sort of romantic push me pull you approach with great variations in tempo. It's also, by the way, this was all written down decades later by a guy named Bloom, who supposedly reported what was related to him about the Meiningen tradition. And one of the things we find out, by the way, is that all the orchestras in those days played with vibrato, going well back into the 19th century, because there are two places in that typescript where he says, do not use vibrato, which he never would have had to say unless they were using vibrato. Very interesting. But Macaris, again, it's not the fact that Macaris is adopting an approach slavishly, because Macaris is way too good a musician for that. It's because he's a great musician, and his greatness as a musician manifests itself in the context of the style of performance that he's adopting. These are wonderful, wonderful performances. They're a joy to listen to, and different from any others, but always musical, always true to the work, always full of character and personality. And I love this cycle. I really do. And if you're looking for sort of the period approach, you're never going to do better than Macaris. Whether it's on period instruments or not doesn't make any difference, because he makes everyone give him the sound he wants, irrespective of the kind of instruments they happen to be using. Now, here is a sort of a sleeper set, but it's really, really very good and a big surprise. Antal Dorati on Mercury Living Presence. Nobody thinks about Dorati, but he was a very good Beethoven conductor and a very good Brahms conductor, and good at Tchaikovsky, and he did the complete Haydn symphonies. I mean, he was a very good conductor, period. And he was also Hungarian, and that has something to do with it, something to do with the soul, the singing quality. These are fast performances, exciting performances, not breathless, but really just wonderfully direct and full of color and charm and punch and gusto and piss and vinegar where you need to have it. I like this cycle very much. It's very, very enjoyable. It may not be the deepest in some respects. It's not the most cosmic, but it's awfully good. It really is. It's with the London Symphony Orchestra and the Minneapolis Symphony Orchestra, in which one of these has Minneapolis, the second, and all the others are with the London Symphony. A wonderful cycle, well worth hearing. Another one that may come as a surprise, given my predilections, is Karajan. Ooh, I gotta even take the booklet out because I don't want you to see the glare. This is Karajan, excuse me, I have an itch. Karajan in 1978. Now, Karajan, of course, did the Brahms symphonies 350 times. He did them every 10 minutes. I don't think he was at his best in the German repertoire, to be honest with you, but this was the same time he did his second Beethoven cycle for Deutsche Grammophon. And he did Brahms shortly thereafter. It was 77, I think, was the Beethoven cycle. 78 was the Brahms cycle. This was a period where the orchestra was the most fully his. They gave him his kind of sound, his conception, and they were absolutely at the top of their game. Now, you may not like their game. That's another issue, isn't it? You may not like that slick legato and cushy sonority, but I think actually in Brahms, he tempers it somewhat. He allows you to hear what detail you're supposed to hear in the music. And Brahms, of course, is a composer whose orchestration is fundamentally based on string sonority, and everything else is kind of an extra. Not that there aren't lovely solos for other instruments, there are, and he doesn't write lovely woodwind parts, which he does, but his sonority in symphonies begins and ends with a string section, and you will never hear a more beautiful string section than Karajan's. So that is really, that 1978 cycle, I think, is really pretty first class. It really is. It never drags. It's beautifully, beautifully shaped. Also superb, and this is really going to shock you, in Brahms is Schulte. You know, Schulte, the butcher, the guy who's always supposed to be a maniac, the guy who always picked up his baton and was like this, when he's conducting. No, he might have looked like that while he was doing the Brahms symphonies, but they come out sounding pretty damn wonderful. Schulte's Brahms, I think, has a genuine sympathy and romantic feel about it. His slow movements tend to be slow, but the fast movements are never crude. He never overdrives the music, but they're exciting in Schulte's style. He allows himself to find the character of each work, again, within the context of the style. There are no poor performances in Schulte's Brahms cycle. And it's very interesting to note that he only did one Brahms cycle. I think he knew. I mean, really, it was one of the best things he ever did. And it's first class. So Schulte is really worth considering. Schulte in Chicago, first class Brahms cycle. And I'm happy to say so. I really am. There are beautiful things that the man did. And I think the Brahms cycle is something that really he should have been proud of. Next, Günter Wand. Now, Günter Wand made two Brahms cycles. This is the first. They were both with the NDR Symphony Orchestra from Hamburg, and the first cycle is the better of the two. In the second cycle, he started to monkey around and potchkey with the parts a little bit, and I think it came out sounding somewhat mannered. It's still very good. I mean, it's the same basic approach, only more interventionist, but I think in this cycle, not that he's letting the music speak for itself. We're not talking about that, guys. But he achieves what he wants to achieve. Again, much like von Beinum does, through balance, through phrasing, through texture, through transparency. And this has one of the best performances of the finale of the Third Symphony you will ever hear in your life. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous cycle. So Günter Wand and NDR, definitely worth considering. Now we're going to do two sort of classic traditional Brahms cycles by classic Brahmsians. You know this one's got to be here. It absolutely has to be here. I'm going to give you a hint. You can say it first. Otto Klemperer. Yes, Klemperer, who came from Hamburg, who knew Brahms. No, he didn't, but I mean, he could have. He was around. And the fact of the matter is that Klemperer's Brahms is just tremendous. It really is tremendous. He was one of the few people in his day to take the exposition repeat in the first movement of the Third Symphony. His first symphony is cosmic. It is granitic. That's the word, granitic, like granite, like hewn from stone. It's fantastic. His fourth is kind of eccentric. It's really, really interesting the way he handles the Passacaglia and the third movement. I love it. Some people don't. Some people think it's a little bit too eccentric. And the second is never too slow. None of these are too slow. He was not slow in Brahms. He was solid, rock solid. It was a German approach. A very similar approach, by the way, is taken in another really, really fine Brahms cycle, which was very difficult to find, and that's Kurt Sanderling with the Staatskapelle Dresden. Sanderling also did more than one, but the one to hear is the one on Eurodisc with the Staatskapelle Dresden, if you can still find it. That is also a great Brahms cycle, and it's very much in the Klemperer tradition of playing Brahms, that solid German, that kind of thing. A great, great cycle. And Klemperer's Brahms, of course, is German Requiem and the violin concerto. I mean, it's just, to die for. It's absolutely as great as it gets in Brahms. But the other guy who was a contemporary of Klemperer, a little older actually, I think, Bruno Walter. Here they are. Bruno Walter was an incomparably great Brahmsian. And again, there's somebody who really knew the style because he was alive when Brahms was alive. I mean, these guys grew up playing Brahms, right? And they understood how to do it. And it's really kind of shocking that younger conductors today don't just sit their asses down in a chair and play these recordings and say, oh, this is how we do it. Now, Walter left us 2 Brahms cycles, right? The first is in mono with the New York Philharmonic. It's on here. And of course, it's in the big Bruno Walter box. And it has the fastest third in the universe. It's unbelievably exciting, but maybe a little crazy. And the end of the second symphony. Most conductors now beat it steadily. Whoa, this takes off like a shot. It takes off like a bat out of hell. It is the most exciting performance of the finale of the second you will ever hear. But again, it's all within an idiomatic Brahms style. And so the monocycle is definitely worth having, although it's more uneven than the late Columbia Symphony cycle, which a lot of people don't like because it's late. But this contains the best performance of the Third Symphony ever, in my opinion. Astonishingly fantastic. And all of them are of a piece. They're all magnificent performances, completely consistent, beautifully done. I don't find any of them to be underplayed or too slow or too soft-edged. In fact, listening to them now after many, many, many years, when they first came out, people said, well, he's getting old, and the first wasn't as exciting as some other people's. And that's true. He was no Toscanini, let's put it that way. But wow, this is the echt Brahms style. It is echt. And if you want echtacity or echtitude, then Walter is the guy you've got to hear. These are fabulous, fabulous Brahms performances. Now we have, let's see, oh my, well, 4 or 5 more to go. Let's see how we do. One cycle that you are not going to see in this pile, and that may come as a shock as well, is George Szell with the Cleveland Orchestra. Now, Szell's Brahms is Szell. It is incredibly well played, incredibly well thought out, unbelievably detailed, magnificently translucent, and I find it somewhat stiff and over-controlled. It's just not to my taste. Others swear by it and love it, but if you want to have that kind of performance, and I know you'll probably kill me for saying so, the one you have to get is Dochnani with Cleveland. This is one of the absolute great Brahms cycles in that style. If like the Toscanini tradition, there are a couple of them. We're going to get to another one in a minute. But boy, oh boy, is this hot stuff. Just like his Dvorak, which I also think is better than Szell's by and large. Why? Because in addition to all of the clarity, all of the transparency, all of the fabulous detail, the chamber music give and take, all of those things, there's also a warmth, a sense of stylishness, a bit of leeway, a little freedom in the phrasing, a little more excitement at the climaxes. I think this is absolutely as good as Brahms gets in modern performance, and Dochnani in Cleveland on Warner, you can't do better. Absolutely fantastic. Also, absolutely fantastic, and I never tire of saying so because I dog this poor man so often, Claudio Abbado with the Berlin Philharmonic. This, by general consensus, is the finest thing he did in Berlin. It really is, as a series. There isn't anything he did that comes anywhere close to this. His Brahms is superb. And maybe it's superb because Brahms was sort of a micromanager as a composer, and Abbado was a micromanager as a conductor. Now, somebody in the comments said to me, oh, well, I saw him rehearse. He didn't micromanage. He just let the orchestra play. Well, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Not in performance. I don't care how he rehearsed. I saw him rehearse too. That's true. Sometimes in rehearsal, he would just sit there and turn pages. One of my friends who comments here saw him rehearse in London. I think it was Daphnis and Chloe he told me about. He just sat there looking at the score. He didn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything. What matters is what happens on the day in performance. And Abbado was fussy, but Brahms allowed him to fuss in a productive way, just like Rossini did, by the way. You know, there are certain composers who benefit from people who take a lot of care, who sweat the details, and Abbado sweated the details. It's that simple. And Brahms benefits when you sweat the details. These are gloriously played, fantastically interpreted, beautifully recorded. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous Brahms cycle, first class in every way. I listened to it with enormous pleasure. And I am happy to congratulate the late Maestro Abbado on his achievement in this cycle, which is a considerable achievement, you know? You wonder sometimes how these conductors who are so built up in terms of their PR and their reputations and they can do anything and they record anything and they don't have any business sense. They don't have, you know, I mean, Abbado had zero sense when it came to choosing repertoire. But there are times when they really live up to their reputation. And when that happens, we know why they had the authority that they did and the respect that they earned. And Abbado earns it in his Brahms cycle. Now, two Brahms cycles in a similar tradition, actually, to the Dochnani and that kind of sense, actually from a Zell protege, James Levine. One with Chicago, one with Vienna. I can't choose between them. They are two of the most fantastic Brahms cycles that you will ever hear. I kind of like the Chicago one a little bit better, only because it's a little bit leaner in texture, which I think benefits the music. But the Vienna one, oh my God, it's so gorgeous. My God, it's beautiful. And the playing in both of these is stunning. Razor sharp, again, controlled like Zell would control things, but with that extra element of character, personality, a bit of relaxation, the give and take between the conductor and the orchestra. It's all there. And I mean, I can't speak highly enough about these two cycles. They are amazing. Just amazing. And of course, as with all of these things, how you feel about James Levine right now is going to be a personal thing, given his Me Too issues. But my God, was he a great Brahms conductor. He really, really was. And he gave us two absolutely first-rate Brahms cycles. And you're really missing something if you haven't heard them. However, now we come to that magical moment, that astonishing moment when I tell you in no uncertain terms what the greatest Brahms cycles in the history of recorded humanity are. I really mean it, folks. These are incomparably great, stunning, fabulous, and there are two of them by the same guy. And that guy is Eugen Joachim. Eugen Joachim was such an underrated genius of a conductor. Here you have it with the Berlin Philharmonic in mono, but very good mono, very good sound, and his remakes with the London Philharmonic, which are equally fine in excellent stereo. The London Phil never did a better Brahms cycle, certainly not for Adrian Bolt. Sorry. Oh, yes, where were we? Joachim. Yes, here's the point. Joachim was a humanist on the podium. His music making, no matter what it was, always just radiated warmth, humanity, style. He understood that wonderful long singing line, but he never made it saccharine or sentimental. He had Furtwängler's flexibility of pulse. He could speed up and slow down totally organically. He could shape a big paragraph. He conducted in large sections that had a wonderful feeling of intensity and climax and tension and relaxation. But at the same time, he had the discipline. He got the orchestra to play everything together, unlike Furtwängler. He made sure that the orchestra realized his conception of the music. whatever that happened to be. And he had a reputation, of course, as the great Bruckner conductor. But the fact is, he was every bit as persuasive in Brahms, every bit. And you really do not know how Brahms should sound unless you've heard Joachim's Brahms. If you're going to get just one, get the mono DG. It's so essential. The performances are so exciting, so all of a piece, just totally of a piece. But the EMI ones, I mean, now they're only available in this big Joachim box, which is not bad because you get his Staatskapelle Dresden Bruckner cycle, you get his Brahms cycle, you get his late Beethoven cycle with the LSO, which is also first class. No one ever talks about it. It's a great Beethoven cycle, absolutely first rate. And you also get astonishing Bach, a great B minor mass with the Bavarian radio forces. I mean, Joachim was special. He was really special. And so you have to hear his Brahms. And with that said, I think that is all we need to do to talk about the Brahms symphonies. I know you'll have your favorites. I am not trying to be comprehensive in this talk. You can't be. It's not possible. I don't remember every single Brahms cycle I've ever heard. I mean, I could list half a dozen more in a second that I think are very good, and maybe 24 more that I think suck. But what's the point? This is enough. It's enough so that anyone out there who loves Brahms and is looking to get Brahms symphonies for themselves, maybe different cycles so you can hear a range of interpretive options in Brahms, will know what to do. The entire range of Brahms interpretation is contained in these recommendations. And I know, you hardcore collector people who have 30 billion cycles of everything, and are pulling performances out of every nook and cranny of your home. I know how that feels. I really do. I really get it, guys. I really do. But I want this talk also to be for people who are looking to get their first complete Brahms cycle or their first complete Brahms cycles, to understand that there's a range of interpretive options in the music and that all of the ones that I have recommended are excellent. They are truly excellent. Whichever ones you get will give you a wonderful introduction, not just to Brahms, but to the artist's view of Brahms. And from there, you should be free to explore to your heart's content and find whatever other versions touch you, that touch you most deeply. I happen to think that if you're getting started and you really want to be moved, then the cycles that you should look at most closely are Joachim's. I just feel that way because they move me, but I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak personally. But I hope this gives you a good sense of what's out there and where to start in your journey through the wonderful, indescribable, absolutely inexhaustibly rewarding world of the Brahms symphonies. They are special works. So thank you and keep on listening. Take care.